I never thought a 2-inch layer of snow on my Honda Accord would land me in a war with the most vindictive homeowners association in Boulder, Colorado. But here we are. My name is Andrew Aldridge, and I have lived in the Pinewood Springs community for 3 years without incident until last Tuesday morning, when I found a bright orange violation notice stuck to my front door. The notice claimed I was in violation of HOA Covenant Section 12.4, which apparently stated that all vehicles must be maintained in a clean and presentable condition at all times. The fine was $250, due within 7 days. I stood there in my pajamas at 6:30 in the morning, coffee mug in hand, staring at this absurd piece of paper while snow continued to fall around me. My car had maybe 2 inches of fresh powder on it from the overnight snowfall. Half the cars in the neighborhood looked exactly the same. I called the HOA office as soon as they opened at 9. A woman answered with a clipped, professional tone that immediately put me on edge. "Pinewood Springs HOA, this is Deborah speaking." "Hi, this is Andrew Aldridge from 428 Spruce Lane. I received a violation notice this morning about snow on my car, and I think there has been some mistake." "No mistake, Mr. Aldridge. Your vehicle was documented at 5:45 this morning as being in violation of our cleanliness standards. It snowed overnight." My car had snow on it like every other car in the neighborhood. Your vehicle had significantly more accumulation than others, and it has been parked in the same spot for 3 days without being cleared. I felt my jaw tighten. I work from home. I do not need to drive every day. And it literally snowed last night. Everyone has snow on their cars right now. The board has reviewed the photographic evidence and determined the violation is valid. You have 7 days to pay the fine. Have a nice day, Mr. Aldridge. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, absolutely bewildered. I had been fined $250 for snow on my car during a Colorado winter. The absurdity of it made me laugh, but the laugh died quickly when I realized these people were dead serious. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting, which according to the community newsletter was scheduled for that Thursday evening. I spent the next 2 days documenting every single car in the neighborhood with my phone camera. At least 40 vehicles had snow, dirt, or some combination of both on them. Some were far worse than mine had ever been. I compiled everything into a neat folder on my laptop and prepared my defense. Thursday evening arrived cold and clear. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the main entrance of our neighborhood. I arrived 15 minutes early and found about a dozen other residents already seated in the folding chairs arranged in rows facing a long table. Behind the table sat 4 people, 3 women and 1 man, all appearing to be in their late 40s to early 60s. The woman in the center had short blonde hair styled in what I could only describe as a speak-to-the-manager cut. She wore a burgundy blazer and had reading glasses perched on her nose as she shuffled through papers. This, I would soon learn, was Patricia Henderson, the HOA president and the source of most of my future problems. "Good evening, everyone," Patricia said, her voice carrying that same clipped tone I had heard on the phone. "Let us call this meeting to order. First on our agenda is the approval of last month's minutes." I sat through 20 excruciating minutes of budget discussions, landscaping proposals, and debate over whether the community pool should open Memorial Day weekend or the first week of June. Finally, Patricia asked if there was any new business. I raised my hand. "Yes, I would like to address the board about a violation notice I received." Patricia's eyes fixed on me with what I can only describe as predatory interest. State your name and address for the record. Andrew Aldridge, 428 Spruce Lane. I received a notice claiming my car violated cleanliness standards because it had snow on it. I have documented evidence showing dozens of other vehicles in similar or worse condition. Mr. Aldridge, Patricia interrupted before I could continue, the board reviews each violation on a case-by-case basis. Your vehicle was reported by a concerned community member and subsequently verified by our property manager. But it snowed that night. Having snow on a car during winter is completely normal. The covenant clearly states that vehicles must be maintained in clean and presentable condition. Snow accumulation for multiple days constitutes a violation of that standard. Then, why are not 40 other homes being fined? I have photos right here. I pulled out my phone, but Patricia held up her hand. Mr. Aldridge, this is not the venue for challenging board decisions. If you wish to appeal your fine, you must submit a written request within 14 days. This meeting is for community business, not individual grievances. This affects the entire community if you are selectively enforcing rules. Mr. Aldridge, I will ask you one more time to observe proper meeting protocol, or I will have you removed. The room had gone completely silent. I looked around and saw other residents avoiding eye contact, heads down, clearly wanting no part of this confrontation. The man sitting next to Patricia, who I later learned was the treasurer, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I sat back down, my hands shaking with frustration. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, but I barely heard any of it. When it finally ended, I approached the table where Patricia was gathering her papers. Mrs. Henderson, I would like to understand the specific complaint against my vehicle. She did not look up. As I stated, you may file a written appeal. I am trying to resolve this reasonably. Now she looked at me, and her eyes were cold. Mr. Aldridge, let me be clear. I have been president of this HOA for 7 years. I take community standards very seriously. When residents like you choose to let their properties and vehicles fall into disrepair, it affects everyone's home values. Your fine stands. If you do not pay within 7 days, it will increase to $500, and we will place a lien on your property. Good evening. She walked past me, leaving me standing alone in the community center. I could not believe what had just happened. This woman had essentially declared war over 2 inches of snow. I went home that night determined to fight this. I spent hours reading through the HOA covenants, all 83 pages of dense legal language. Section 12.4 did mention vehicle appearance, but it was clearly intended to prevent people from keeping broken-down cars or commercial vehicles in their driveways. There was nothing specific about snow or temporary weather-related conditions. I drafted a formal appeal letter citing the ambiguity of the covenant language and the selective enforcement of the rule. I included photos of other vehicles, timestamps, and a detailed argument about reasonable interpretation during winter months. I submitted it to the HOA office the next morning. 3 days later, I received a response. My appeal was denied. The letter, signed by Patricia Henderson, stated that the board had reviewed my submission and found no grounds to overturn the violation. The fine was still due in 4 days. I sat at my kitchen table, reading the denial letter for the 3rd time, when something inside me snapped. I had tried being reasonable. I had followed their procedures. They had rejected everything. Fine. If they wanted to play hardball over snow on a car, I would show them what that actually looked like. I started planning that afternoon. Our neighborhood had one main entrance that split into 2 streets, Spruce Lane and Cedar Drive. These streets formed a loop that eventually reconnected at the back of the community, before returning to the main entrance. There was no other way in or out. The HOA office and community center were located near this main entrance, along with designated parking spaces for the board members. The entrance itself was about 20 feet wide, enough for 2 cars to pass each other comfortably. But if a vehicle was positioned just right, perpendicular to the road at the narrowest point where the community entrance met the public street, it would effectively block anyone from entering or leaving. My Honda Accord was about 15 feet long. It would fit perfectly. I knew this was nuclear option territory. I knew it would cause massive problems. But I had tried everything else, and Patricia Henderson had made it clear she had no intention of being reasonable. If they wanted to fine me for snow on my car, then my car was about to become everyone's problem. Saturday morning arrived with clear skies and temperatures hovering around 25 degrees. I waited until 9 o'clock, right when I knew Patricia would be arriving at the HOA office for her weekly administrative hours. I got in my car, which I had deliberately not cleaned since the initial violation, started the engine, and drove slowly through the neighborhood toward the main entrance. As I approached, I could see Patricia's silver Lexus already parked in front of the community center. Perfect. I pulled up to the entrance, positioned my car perpendicular to the road, put it in park, turned off the engine, and got out. The positioning was perfect. No one could get in or out without physically moving my vehicle. I locked the doors, pocketed my keys, and started walking back toward my house. I had made it maybe 50 feet when I heard a door slam. "Excuse me, excuse me." I turned to see Patricia Speed walking toward me, her face already flushed with anger. "Mr. Aldridge, you need to move your vehicle immediately." "I do not think I do, Mrs. Henderson." "You are blocking the entrance. This is private property. Actually, if you check the property survey, my car is positioned on the public street. I am legally parked." This was true. I had spent Friday afternoon at the county assessor's office reviewing the exact property lines. The entrance to Pinewood Springs started about 10 feet back from where I had parked. I was fully on public property. Patricia's face went from flushed to deep red. "This is absolutely unacceptable. You cannot just block an entire neighborhood." "Funny, I thought we could not have snow on our cars either, but here we are." "Move your car right now or I will have it towed." "On what grounds?" "I am legally parked on a public street. Go ahead and call a tow company." "I will wait right here while you explain to them why they should illegally tow a properly parked vehicle." Patricia pulled out her phone, her hands shaking with rage. I stood there calmly, watching as she dialed. She walked a few feet away, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I could not hear everything, but I caught phrases like blocking the entrance and emergency situation. She returned a few minutes later. "A tow truck is on the way. You are going to regret this, Mr. Aldridge." I already regret buying a house in a community run by people who fine residents for weather. But here we are. "You are in violation of multiple covenants, really." "Which ones?" "I am not on HOA property. I am not violating any parking laws. My car is registered, insured, and legally parked." "What exactly am I violating?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "You are deliberately causing a disruption to the community. I am parking my car, the same car you fine me for having snow on. Speaking of which, it still has snow on it. Are you going to fine me again?" Before Patricia could respond, another car pulled up from inside the neighborhood, trying to exit. It was a young woman in a Toyota, probably in her late 20s. She rolled down her window, looking confused. "Is everything okay? I need to get to work." Patricia immediately shifted into concerned community leader mode. "I am so sorry, dear. Mr. Aldridge here has decided to illegally block our entrance. We are handling it." I am legally parked on a public street, I called out. The HOA president is upset because I refuse to pay a bogus fine. The woman looked between us, clearly not wanting to be involved in whatever this was. Can you please just move so I can get to work? I have a shift in 30 minutes. I am sorry, but no. Take it up with Mrs. Henderson and the HOA board. They created this situation. The woman's expression hardened. Are you serious right now? I am going to be late. Then I suggest you talk to the people who fine residents for having snow on their cars during a Colorado winter. She rolled up her window and pulled out her phone, presumably calling work to explain why she would be late. Patricia looked like she wanted to murder me with her bare hands. You are affecting innocent people. So did you when you fined me $250 for no legitimate reason. Difference is, I tried to resolve this reasonably. You refused. Now everyone gets to share in the experience. More cars started to accumulate behind the woman in the Toyota. I counted 5 vehicles trying to exit within 10 minutes. Word was clearly spreading inside the neighborhood that something was blocking the entrance. My phone started buzzing with notifications from the Pinewood Springs Community Facebook group. I pulled it out and scrolled through the messages. People were confused, angry, demanding to know what was happening. Someone had posted a photo of my car blocking the entrance with the caption, "Some jerk is trapping us all inside." The comments were already getting heated. I typed out a response. Andrew Aldridge here. I am the jerk. Patricia Henderson and the HOA board fined me $250 for having snow on my car. I appealed using proper channels. They denied it. I asked for reasonable discussion. They refused. My car will remain parked here until the fine is rescinded. Direct your complaints to the board. I hit post and watched as the comment thread exploded. Some people were furious at me. Others were questioning why anyone would be fined for snow on a car. A few started sharing their own stories of ridiculous HOA violations. The thread devolved into chaos within minutes. A tow truck arrived about 20 minutes after Patricia's call. The driver got out, looked at my car, looked at Patricia, and shook his head. "Madam, this vehicle is legally parked on a public street. I cannot tow it. He is deliberately blocking our community entrance." That may be, but unless a police officer directs me to tow it for a legitimate parking violation, I cannot touch it. I could lose my license. This is an emergency situation. No, madam, it is not. This is a civil dispute. You need to call the police if you believe a crime is being committed. The driver got back in his truck and drove away. Patricia's face had progressed beyond red to an almost purple shade. She turned back to me. "Fine. I am calling the police. Please do. I would love to hear you explain to an officer why you are calling in a police matter over a legally parked car." She dialed again, and this time I could tell she was speaking to emergency services. She gave the address, explained there was a vehicle blocking the community entrance, and requested an officer. She was careful to make it sound like an urgent public safety matter rather than an HOA dispute. 2 Boulder Police Department cruisers arrived about 15 minutes later. 2 officers got out, both looking like they would rather be anywhere else. The first officer, a tall man probably in his mid-30s with a name tag reading Martinez, approached Patricia first. "Madam, you called about a blocked entrance." "Yes, officer. This man," she pointed at me, "has deliberately parked his vehicle to prevent residents from entering or leaving our community." Officer Martinez looked at my car, walked around it, checked the street signs and curb markings, then came over to me. "Sir, is this your vehicle?" "Yes, officer. Andrew Aldridge. That is my car. Can you explain why it is parked here?" "I am legally parked on a public street. I am not blocking any fire hydrants, driveways, or traffic signs. I am not in violation of any parking ordinances, but you are blocking the entrance to this neighborhood. I am parked on a public street. If the neighborhood entrance happens to be narrow, that is not my problem. The second officer, a woman named Chen according to her name tag, joined us. Sir, even if you are technically legally parked, you are clearly causing a disruption. Would you be willing to move your vehicle to avoid further issues? I would be happy to, officer, as soon as Mrs. Henderson and the HOA board rescind the bogus fine they issued me for having snow on my car. Officer Martinez pinched the bridge of his nose. Is this about an HOA dispute? He was issued a legitimate violation fine and is now retaliating against the entire community. Patricia jumped in. Mrs. Henderson, please, sir, what is this fine for? They fined me $250 because my car had snow on it after it snowed. I appealed through proper channels. They denied it. I asked for a reasonable discussion. They refused, so now my car sits here until they act reasonably. Officer Chen pulled out her notepad. Mrs. Henderson, did you actually fine this man for having snow on his car? He was in violation of our cleanliness covenants. The vehicle had excessive accumulation during winter. In Colorado, the amount of snowfall is irrelevant. He violated the covenant. Officer Martinez and Officer Chen exchanged a look that clearly said they thought this was the dumbest thing they had been called for all week. Okay, here is the situation, Officer Martinez said. Mr. Aldridge, your vehicle is technically legally parked. I cannot force you to move it. However, you are causing a significant disruption to this community, which could potentially be considered disorderly conduct if we determine you are doing this solely to harass others. I am parking my car, officer. If the HOA wants to resolve this, they know how. Mrs. Henderson, this is clearly an HOA matter, not a criminal one. You need to work this out with Mr. Aldridge through your association's proper channels. He is holding the entire community hostage. He is parking his car, madam. I understand you are frustrated, but this is not a police matter. I suggest you convene your board and try to reach a resolution. Patricia looked like she was about to explode. This is outrageous. You are just going to let him do this. Madam, I am going to let him park his legally owned vehicle on a public street, yes. If you believe he is violating HOA rules, that is a civil matter. You can pursue it through civil court if necessary. The officers returned to their vehicles and drove away, leaving Patricia standing there, visibly shaking with rage. By now, at least 15 cars were backed up trying to exit the neighborhood, and I could see more residents walking up to see what was happening. A middle-aged man in a business suit approached. Are you the one blocking the entrance? I am parking my car, yes. I have a flight to catch. I need to get to the airport. Take it up with the HOA board. They can end this anytime they want. This is insane. I am going to miss my flight. I am sorry about that. But I tried to handle this reasonably, and Patricia Henderson made it clear she had no interest in being reasonable. Now, everyone gets to experience what unreasonable looks like. More people started gathering, and the crowd was getting increasingly hostile. Someone suggested calling a tow truck with a flatbed to physically lift my car. Patricia jumped on this idea and started making calls. I remained calm, knowing that without police authorization, no legitimate towing company would touch a legally parked vehicle, especially with this many witnesses around. An older man approached me, maybe in his 60s, with a kind face. Son, I understand you are upset, but you are affecting a lot of innocent people here. I know, sir, and I am sorry about that, but I paid my HOA fees. I followed their rules. They fined me for something completely unreasonable, and when I tried to appeal, they shut me down without discussion. At what point do we say enough is enough? He nodded slowly. I heard about your fine. My wife and I thought it was ridiculous. A lot of people did, but this is not the way to handle it. What would you suggest? I tried their process. They rejected me. What other option do I have? Pay a bogus fine and encourage them to keep doing this to others. He did not have an answer. He patted my shoulder and walked away, joining the growing crowd of confused and angry residents. Patricia had gathered several board members who had apparently rushed over after hearing about the situation. They huddled together, shooting angry glances in my direction every few seconds. I stood my ground, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, Patricia broke away from the group and marched over to me. Mr. Aldridge, the board is willing to offer you a compromise. I am listening. We will reduce your fine to $100 if you move your vehicle immediately. No. Excuse me, I said no. The fine was bogus to begin with. Reducing a bogus fine still leaves me paying money I should not owe. Rescind it completely. That is not going to happen. You were in legitimate violation. Then I guess my car stays put. We can make your life very difficult, Mr. Aldridge. We can fine you for this disruption. We can pursue legal action. We can make living in this community unbearable for you. You already have. That is why we are here. One of the other board members, a thin woman in her 50s, approached nervously. Patricia, maybe we should consider his request. This is getting out of hand. Absolutely not, Jennifer. If we cave to him, every resident will think they can challenge our authority. But he has a point about the snow fine. I thought it was excessive when you brought it to us. We voted on it, 3-1. The decision was made. I abstained, Patricia. I did not vote in favor. This was news to me, and apparently news to Patricia based on the fury in her eyes. The violation was legitimate. It was snow on a car during winter. He has a point about selective enforcement, too. We have not cited anyone else for similar conditions. Patricia turned on Jennifer like a viper. If you are not going to support board decisions, maybe you should resign. Jennifer stepped back, clearly intimidated. The small moment of backbone disappeared. I am just saying maybe we should reconsider. There is nothing to reconsider. Mr. Aldridge, you have 1 hour to move your vehicle, or we will pursue every legal avenue available to us. Looking forward to it, Mrs. Henderson. She stormed off, the other board members following behind like ducklings. The crowd of residents continued to grow. Some people tried to squeeze past my car on foot to walk to wherever they needed to go. A few succeeded, though it required climbing over the curb and through some landscaping. Someone in the community Facebook group suggested having residents park at the nearby King Soopers grocery store and organizing a carpool system to shuttle people out of the neighborhood. It was creative but completely impractical. The anger in the comment thread was reaching a fever pitch, with people choosing sides and launching into full-blown arguments about HOA authority, individual rights, and whether I was a hero or a villain. Around noon, a local news van pulled up. A reporter and cameraman got out and started filming my car in the backed-up traffic. The reporter, a young woman with a microphone, approached me. "Sir, are you the owner of this vehicle?" "I am." "Can you tell us why you have parked it blocking this neighborhood entrance?" "The HOA fined me $250 for having snow on my car. When I tried to appeal, they denied me without discussion. This is my protest." "So you are holding an entire community hostage over a parking fine?" "I am parking my legally owned vehicle on a public street." The HOA can end this anytime by acting reasonably. She interviewed several angry residents, getting quotes about missed work, appointments, and general frustration. Then she approached Patricia, who I am sure thought this was her moment to paint me as the villain. But the reporter's first question was perfect. Mrs. Henderson, is it true you fined this man for having snow on his car during winter? Patricia's face twitched. He was in violation of community cleanliness standards. But it was snow in Colorado during winter. Does that seem reasonable? Our covenants clearly state that vehicles must be maintained in presentable condition. Would not most people consider some snow on a car during winter weather to be completely normal? The board determined it was a violation. Are you willing to rescind the fine to resolve this situation? Absolutely not. Mr. Aldridge needs to follow proper procedures if he disagrees with board decisions. He says he did appeal through proper channels and was denied. Then he can pursue civil court options. He does not get to disrupt an entire community. The interview continued for a few more minutes before the news crew packed up and left. I knew this story was going to be gold for them. HOA horror stories always got good ratings, especially ones this ridiculous. By 2 in the afternoon, I was getting hungry. I had not planned for this to last quite this long, though I probably should have. I called my friend Marcus, who lived across town, and asked him to bring me some food. He showed up 45 minutes later with burgers and fries, laughing his head off at the situation. "Dude, you are on the news. They are calling you the HOA Avenger." "They are calling me what?" Check Twitter. "It is trending locally." I pulled out my phone and searched. Sure enough, HOA Avenger was trending in the Denver-Boulder area. People were sharing the news story, offering support, sharing their own HOA horror stories. A few people were criticizing me for affecting innocent residents, but the majority seemed to be enjoying the drama. Marcus stayed with me for a while, keeping me company and providing moral support. Around 4 o'clock, Patricia returned with what appeared to be a lawyer in tow, a man in his 50s carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Aldridge, this is Robert Carlson, the HOA's attorney. He has something to say to you." The lawyer looked deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Aldridge, I have been retained by the Pinewood Springs HOA to inform you that if you do not move your vehicle immediately, they will pursue legal action, including but not limited to fines for violation of multiple covenants, a lawsuit for harassment, and a potential restraining order." "On what grounds?" "Your deliberate disruption of the community constitutes harassment of the residents and board members." "I am parking my car on a public street. That is not harassment. That is called exercising my rights." "You are doing so with malicious intent to cause harm to the community." "I am doing so to protest an unjust fine." Big difference. "Mr. Aldridge, I strongly advise you to move your vehicle. This will not end well for you if you continue." "Mr. Carlson, I appreciate the advice, but unless Mrs. Henderson wants to act like a reasonable human being and rescind a bogus fine, my car stays put." The lawyer turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Henderson, may I speak with you privately?" They walked back toward the community center. I could not hear what they were saying, but based on Patricia's body language and the lawyer's gestures, it seemed like he was trying to talk her down from whatever nuclear option she was planning. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes before Patricia threw her hands up and stormed off. The lawyer returned to his car and drove away, looking defeated. As evening approached, the situation had evolved into something almost surreal. Someone had set up lawn chairs and was selling hot chocolate from a folding table, turning it into a community event. Kids were playing in the snow nearby. A few people had started a tailgate party in the parking lot of the community center. The anger had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something closer to resigned frustration mixed with morbid entertainment. Around 6, a woman in her 30s approached me with a clipboard. "Mr. Aldridge, I am organizing a petition to the board. A lot of us think the fine against you was ridiculous. We are demanding they rescind it and agree to more transparent enforcement of community rules." How many signatures do you have? 42 so far, and I have only been at this for an hour. That is amazing. Thank you. No, thank you. Someone needed to stand up to Patricia. She has been on a power trip for years. Last month, she fined the Thompsons for having their garbage cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours. They had to go to the emergency room that morning and did not get home until late. She would not care. More stories started coming out as people talked. Patricia had apparently been issuing fines left and right for increasingly petty violations. A slightly overgrown lawn, a wreath on a door past Christmas, a basketball hoop that was 6 inches over the allowed height. She had created an environment of fear and frustration, and everyone had just been accepting it because fighting an HOA is expensive and exhausting. Until now. By 8 o'clock that evening, the petition had over 100 signatures, nearly a third of the community. Someone had started a separate Facebook group called Pinewood Springs HOA Reform that already had 80 members. People were talking about forcing a vote to remove Patricia from the board. I was starting to feel the cold and exhaustion setting in when Jennifer, the board member who had briefly stood up to Patricia, approached me alone. "Mr. Aldridge, can we talk?" "Of course." "I want to apologize. Your fine was wrong." I should have voted against it, but I was afraid of standing up to Patricia. She has made it very clear that anyone who disagrees with her will be pushed out. Why does she have so much power? Because she has been president for 7 years and has built up this culture of fear. She threatens legal action. She digs up every tiny violation she can find. She makes life miserable for anyone who challenges her. Most people just pay the fines and move on because it is easier. Well, I am not most people, clearly. Look, I am going to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I am going to move to rescind your fine. I cannot guarantee the votes, but with this petition and the community support, maybe we can get through to the others. What about Patricia? She is going to fight it. But board members can call for votes, not just the president. If I can get one other member to support me, we can force the vote. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate you doing this. It is what I should have done in the first place. She walked away, and for the first time all day, I felt a glimmer of hope. But I was not moving my car until I had official confirmation that the fine was rescinded. I called Marcus back and asked if I could crash at his place for the night. I was not leaving my car unguarded in case Patricia tried something crazy like having it towed in the middle of the night. Marcus offered to bring me a sleeping bag and thermos of coffee, which I gratefully accepted. As the temperature dropped into the teens, most of the residents went home. A few hardy souls remained in their cars, either unable or unwilling to leave. I settled into my sleeping bag in the driver's seat of my Honda, keeping the engine running periodically for heat, watching the occasional car headlights reflect off my mirrors. Around midnight, a pickup truck pulled up. An older man, maybe in his 70s, got out and walked over to my window. I rolled it down. "You the HOA Avenger?" "That is what they are calling me, I guess." He handed me a thermos. "Homemade chili. Figured you could use something warm. Thank you so much. That is incredibly kind." I lived in an HOA in Florida for 20 years before moving here. Board president there was just like your Patricia. Made everyone's life hell because she could. Someone needs to stand up to these people. Good on you, son. He walked back to his truck and drove away, leaving me with the warmth of both the chili and the knowledge that I was not alone in this fight. The night was long and brutally cold. Even with the sleeping bag and periodic engine running, I barely slept. Every time I started to doze off, the cold would wake me up, or a car would pull up trying to leave the neighborhood. By the time dawn broke, I was exhausted, frozen, and questioning my life choices. But I was not moving. Around 8 in the morning, Jennifer called me. The emergency board meeting is set for 10. Can you be there? I will walk over, but my car stays put. Understood. I have 2 other board members who have agreed to vote to rescind your fine. Patricia is furious, but she cannot stop the vote. What about the 4th member? Richard has not said which way he is voting. He usually sides with Patricia, but the community pressure might sway him. Guess we will find out. I got out of my car, stretched my frozen muscles, and walked back to my house to shower and change. The hot water felt like heaven after a night in my car. I put on clean clothes, made a strong pot of coffee, and headed to the community center. The parking lot was packed. Word had spread about the emergency meeting, and it seemed like half the neighborhood had shown up. The small community center could not hold everyone, so people were standing outside in the cold, trying to peer through windows. Inside, the board was already seated at their table. Patricia looked like she had not slept either, her eyes red and her expression murderous. Jennifer sat at one end, avoiding eye contact with Patricia. The 2 other members, Richard and a woman named Susan, looked uncomfortable. Patricia banged a gavel on the table. This emergency meeting is called to order. Board member Jennifer Russo has called for a vote to rescind a legitimate violation fine against Andrew Aldridge. I want it on record that I believe this is a complete waste of time and undermines the authority of this board. Jennifer cleared her throat. I move that we rescind the $250 fine issued to Andrew Aldridge for vehicle cleanliness violation. The fine was issued for snow accumulation during normal winter weather conditions, which I believe represents an unreasonable interpretation of our cleanliness covenant. I second the motion, Susan said quietly. Patricia's face went red. The violation was legitimate. He was in clear breach of covenant section 12.4. Patricia, the covenant says vehicles must be maintained in presentable condition. Having snow on a car after a snowfall is completely normal and does not constitute a lack of maintenance, Jennifer countered. The board voted on this. You voted on this, Patricia. I abstained. Susan was not at that meeting, and Richard reluctantly agreed after you pressured him for 20 minutes. Richard shifted uncomfortably, but did not deny it. Are you questioning my leadership? Patricia's voice had risen to nearly a shout. I am questioning your judgment on this specific fine, yes. The room had gone completely silent. Every resident was watching this unfold with rapt attention. Fine. Let us vote then. All in favor of rescinding the fine. Jennifer raised her hand immediately. Susan raised hers a moment later. All eyes turned to Richard. He looked at Patricia, then at the crowd of residents, then back at his hands on the table. Richard, you know this is wrong, Jennifer said softly. You said so yourself when Patricia first brought it up. That was a private conversation, Patricia snapped. And now it is a public vote. Richard, what do you say? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Richard raised his hand. Motion passes 3-1, Jennifer said, relief evident in her voice. Patricia stood up so fast her chair fell over backward. This is outrageous. You are all undermining years of community standards. We are correcting a bad decision, Patricia. There is a difference. I will not stand for this. I am calling for a vote of no confidence, against whom, all 3 of us. Patricia looked around the room, seeing only hostile faces staring back at her. The power she had wielded for 7 years was crumbling, and she knew it. This board is a joke, she said, grabbing her papers and purse. I resign. She stormed out of the community center, the door slamming behind her. The room erupted in applause and cheers. Jennifer looked shocked. Susan started crying with relief, and Richard just put his head in his hands. Jennifer banged the gavel. Order, please. We still have a community to run. "Mr. Aldridge, your fine is officially rescinded. The board apologizes for the unreasonable enforcement of the covenant." I stood up. "Thank you. I appreciate you doing the right thing." "Will you move your car now?" someone shouted from the back. "Yes, I will move it immediately." More applause. I walked out of the community center, down to where my Honda sat blocking the entrance, got in, and started the engine. The line of cars that had been trapped inside began honking in celebration. I moved my car to a proper parking spot and walked back home, feeling vindicated but also completely exhausted. The local news ran the story that evening, framing it as a David versus Goliath battle between a reasonable homeowner and an out-of-control HOA board. The segment included interviews with residents praising me for standing up to Patricia, clips of the board meeting argument, and Patricia's dramatic resignation. The reporter concluded with a commentary about HOA overreach and the importance of reasonable governance. The story went viral, not just locally, but nationally. Within 48 hours, I was getting interview requests from national news outlets, podcasts, and even a producer who wanted to option the story for a TV movie. I declined most of them, but I did agree to a few interviews to talk about HOA reform and homeowner rights. The attention brought scrutiny to Patricia's entire tenure as board president. An enterprising resident named David started digging through old board meeting minutes and financial records. What he found was disturbing. Patricia had issued over 300 violation fines in 7 years, totaling more than $50,000 in collected fees. The money was supposed to go into community improvement funds, but there were significant discrepancies in the accounting. David brought his findings to Jennifer, who was now serving as interim board president. Jennifer contacted an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. The attorney reviewed the records and concluded there was sufficient evidence of financial mismanagement to warrant a formal investigation. The board voted unanimously to hire a forensic accountant. 2 weeks later, the accountant's report confirmed that approximately $15,000 in violation fine revenue could not be accounted for. The money had been deposited into HOA accounts, but then transferred out in a series of small transactions over several years. The transfers were all authorized by Patricia's signature alone. Jennifer called an emergency community meeting. Nearly every resident showed up, packing the community center beyond capacity. Jennifer explained the findings, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief. It appears that Patricia Henderson has been embezzling HOA funds for years. The board has voted to report this to the police and pursue criminal charges. The room erupted. People were shouting questions, demanding answers, expressing shock and anger. Some residents had paid thousands in fines over the years, money that was supposed to improve their community but had apparently gone into Patricia's pocket. Jennifer banged the gavel repeatedly. "Please, everyone, we are taking this seriously. We have contacted the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. They are opening an investigation. We will cooperate fully and keep the community informed." True to her word, detectives from the Boulder County Sheriff's Office arrived 2 days later. They spent hours at the community center, reviewing records, interviewing board members, and collecting evidence. I was interviewed as well, since my case had been the catalyst for uncovering the embezzlement. The detective, a woman named Sarah Morrison, asked detailed questions about my fine, the appeal process, and Patricia's behavior throughout the confrontation. "Did Mrs. Henderson ever say anything that suggested she was using HOA funds inappropriately?" Detective Morrison asked. "Not directly, but she was extremely aggressive about collecting the fine. She threatened liens, legal action, everything she could think of. At the time, I thought she was just power hungry. Now I wonder if she needed that money for something. We are building a case. Financial crimes take time, but we are finding a pattern of behavior going back years. 3 weeks after the investigation began, Patricia Henderson was arrested. The news showed footage of her being led out of her house in handcuffs, her face a mask of rage and humiliation. She was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft by deception. The total amount of stolen funds had grown to over $18,000 as the investigation uncovered more hidden transactions. The Boulder Daily Camera ran a front-page story with the headline, "HOA President Arrested for Embezzlement After Homeowner Revolt." The article detailed my car blocking protest, the community uprising, and the subsequent discovery of financial crimes. I was quoted extensively, talking about the importance of questioning authority and demanding accountability. Patricia's first court appearance was scheduled for mid-March. The community was buzzing with anticipation. Several residents planned to attend to show support for prosecution. The DA's office indicated they had a strong case and were pursuing significant jail time. In the meantime, the Pinewood Springs HOA underwent massive reforms. Jennifer, as interim president, led the charge. The board implemented new rules requiring multiple signatures for any financial transactions, mandatory quarterly audits, and transparency reports posted to the community website. Violation fine procedures were completely overhauled to include mandatory warning periods, clearer covenant language, and an independent appeals process. The community also voted to refund every fine Patricia had issued that could not be clearly justified. It turned out many of the violations had been questionable at best, tyrannical at worst. Residents started receiving checks in the mail, sometimes for hundreds of dollars. The HOA reserve fund took a hit, but the community decided rebuilding trust was more important than maintaining cash reserves. My refunded fine of $250 arrived with a formal apology letter signed by all 3 remaining board members. I framed both the check and the letter as a reminder that standing up to injustice, even over something as small as snow on a car, can matter. Patricia's trial began in late April. I attended along with about 30 other Pinewood Springs residents. The prosecution laid out a methodical case showing years of systematic theft. Patricia had used her position as HOA president to issue excessive fines, collect the money, and then siphon off portions for personal use. She had been careful at first, taking small amounts that would not raise immediate suspicion. But as the years went on and nobody questioned her, she grew bolder. The stolen money had funded a surprising array of personal expenses. Vacations, shopping sprees, home renovations, even payments on a boat she kept at Lake Granby. She had been living well beyond her means for years, using homeowner money to subsidize her lifestyle. Her defense attorney tried to argue that the financial record keeping was poor, and the missing money could be attributed to accounting errors rather than intentional theft. But the forensic accountant's testimony was damning. The pattern was too consistent, too deliberate to be mistakes. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Patricia's sentencing hearing was set for June. The judge listened to testimony from multiple residents about how her tyrannical leadership had affected their lives. Jennifer testified about the culture of fear Patricia had created. I testified about my experience and how it had exposed the deeper corruption. The judge sentenced Patricia Henderson to 4 years in state prison, plus restitution of all stolen funds and court costs. She was led out of the courtroom in tears, her husband sitting in the gallery looking devastated and humiliated. Back in Pinewood Springs, Life slowly returned to normal. Jennifer was elected as permanent board president in a special election. She ran on a platform of transparency, fairness, and community engagement. She won with 85% of the vote. 2 new board members were elected as well, both committed to reform. The community held a barbecue in late June to celebrate new beginnings. It was the first time in years that residents actually wanted to gather together rather than avoiding each other for fear of being reported for some minor violation. Kids played in the community pool. Adults grilled burgers and hot dogs. Someone set up a cornhole tournament. It felt like an actual community rather than a police state. Marcus came to the barbecue as my guest. We sat at a picnic table, eating burgers and watching the sunset over the mountains. "You know you are a legend now, right?" Marcus said, "for parking my car in a dumb spot, for standing up when nobody else would. That is what heroes do, man. I just wanted them to rescind a stupid fine. And you ended up exposing a criminal and liberating an entire neighborhood from a tyrant. Not bad for a week's work," I laughed. "I did sit in my car overnight in January. That was not fun, but worth it." I looked around at the happy faces, the kids playing without fear of their parents getting fined for some made-up violation, the genuine community spirit that had been missing for so long. Yeah, definitely worth it. The HOA Avenger nickname stuck, though I tried to discourage it. People would recognize me at the grocery store or coffee shops and thank me. Some shared their own HOA horror stories, expressing hope that they could create change in their communities too. A few residents from other Boulder neighborhoods reached out asking for advice on dealing with their own tyrannical boards. I wrote a detailed post on social media outlining what I learned from the experience. Read your covenants thoroughly. Document everything. Use proper channels first, but don't be afraid to escalate if you're being treated unfairly. Build community support. And most importantly, question authority when authority is being abused. The post was shared thousands of times. Life in Pinewood Springs became genuinely pleasant. The new board operated with transparency and fairness. Violations were now handled with warnings and opportunities to correct issues before fines were issued. The few fines that were issued actually made sense, and residents generally paid them without complaint because they were legitimate. Jennifer and I became friends. She told me that my protest had given her the courage to finally stand up to Patricia after years of being intimidated. She had been thinking about resigning from the board entirely before the snow fine incident, because she could not stand being complicit in Patricia's behavior anymore. "You changed everything," she said one evening when we were both at the community center for a board meeting I was attending as a concerned resident. "I know it probably does not feel that way to you, but you really did. I just wanted them to stop being ridiculous about snow on my car. And in the process, you showed everyone that we didn't have to accept being bullied. That mattered." The local news did a follow-up story 6 months after Patricia's sentencing, checking in on how the Pinewood Springs community had transformed. They interviewed residents who talked about feeling safe in their own homes again, not worried about being fined for trivial matters. They interviewed Jennifer about the reforms, and they interviewed me about whether I had any regrets. "None," I said to the camera. Standing up to injustice is never something to regret, even when the injustice seems small. Because small injustices, if left unchecked, become big ones. Patricia Henderson proved that. The reporter asked if I would do it again. Absolutely. Though hopefully next time I can resolve it without spending a night in my car in January. The story ended with footage of the community barbecue, happy families enjoying their neighborhood, free from fear. The reporter's closing line was perfect. Sometimes the hero a community needs is just someone brave enough to park their car in the right spot. As months turned into a year, the transformation of Pinewood Springs became a case study in HOA reform. The Community Associations Institute, a national organization for HOA education, actually invited Jennifer and me to speak at their regional conference about governance best practices and community engagement. We talked about the importance of reasonable enforcement, transparent finances, and listening to homeowner concerns. Other communities started implementing similar reforms, inspired by our story. The Pinewood Springs model became shorthand for HOA governance done right. It was surreal to think that my petty dispute over snow on my car had sparked a broader conversation about how these organizations should operate. Patricia served 2 years of her 4-year sentence before being released on parole. I heard through the community grapevine that she and her husband had divorced, and she had moved out of Colorado entirely. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sympathy. She had brought everything on herself through years of petty tyranny and outright theft, but her life was essentially destroyed. Then again, she had made many lives miserable for years, so perhaps justice had been served. My life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after becoming a minor local celebrity. I still worked from home, still lived in Pinewood Springs, still occasionally got recognized as the HOA Avenger. The Honda Accord that had started everything was still running strong, though I made sure to brush snow off it promptly now, just to avoid any irony. One winter evening, exactly 2 years after the original incident, I was brushing snow off my car after a fresh snowfall when a young couple approached me. They had just moved into the neighborhood. "Excuse me, are you Andrew Aldridge?" the woman asked. "I am. We just wanted to say thank you. We almost didn't buy our house here because we heard horror stories about HOA problems. But then we researched what happened and how the community changed, and we decided it was exactly the kind of neighborhood we wanted to live in. One where people stand up for what's right." "That is really kind of you to say. Welcome to Pinewood Springs. Can we ask you something?" the man said. "If you had known how big this was going to become, would you still have done it?" I thought about that for a moment. The stress, the cold night in my car, the confrontations, the public attention. And then I thought about the community we had now compared to what it had been. The friends I had made, the positive changes that had rippled outward, the justice that had been served. "Yes," I said. "Absolutely yes." They thanked me again and walked back to their house, holding hands. I finished brushing snow off my car, went inside and made myself dinner. Outside my window, I could see lights on in houses throughout the neighborhood, families living their lives without fear of petty tyrants. That was worth everything. The HOA still existed, of course. It had to for the community to function. But it was now what it should have been all along. A group of neighbors working together to maintain common areas and reasonable standards, not a personal fiefdom for someone drunk on petty power. Board meetings were well attended, decisions were made collectively, and residents actually trusted their elected representatives. Jennifer served 2 terms as president before stepping down to focus on other things. She was succeeded by David, the resident who had uncovered Patricia's financial crimes. He continued the tradition of transparent, reasonable governance. The Pinewood Springs HOA became something people pointed to as an example of how it should be done. As for me, I learned valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, the importance of community, and the power of simply saying no to unreasonable authority. I also learned that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can have the biggest consequences. I never intended to become the HOA Avenger, to expose embezzlement, or to spark HOA reform. I just wanted them to rescind a stupid fine. But life has a funny way of turning small moments into big ones. A 2-inch layer of snow on a Honda Accord. A $250 fine. A car parked perpendicular to a neighborhood entrance. Those simple things cascaded into something much larger because one person decided they had had enough of being pushed around. Years later, when people ask me about the whole situation, I always tell them the same thing. Read your HOA covenants, know your rights, document everything, and never be afraid to stand up when something is wrong. And if you absolutely have to block a neighborhood entrance with your car to make a point, make sure you have a sleeping bag and some hot coffee. The story of the Pinewood Springs HOA became part of local legend. Parents told their kids about it as a lesson in standing up to bullies. Real estate agents mentioned it when selling houses in the neighborhood. It was referenced in city council meetings when discussing HOA oversight and regulation. A local brewery even created a limited edition beer called the Avenger with a label showing a car parked perpendicular to a street. I never sought any of that attention. I was just a guy who got fed up with being treated unfairly and decided to do something about it. But in doing so, I apparently struck a nerve with people who felt powerless against their own HOAs, their own petty tyrants, their own systems that seemed designed to crush individual autonomy in the name of conformity and control. The last time I saw Patricia was completely by accident. I was at Denver International Airport heading to visit family when I saw her across the terminal. She looked older, tired, defeated. Our eyes met for just a moment. I saw recognition, then shame, then anger flash across her face before she turned away and disappeared into the crowd. I felt nothing. No vindictiveness, no satisfaction, no sympathy. Just relief that the chapter was fully closed. Today, I still live in Pinewood Springs. My Honda Accord still sits in my driveway, a little older, a little more weathered, but still running fine. When it snows, I brush it off when I get around to it, usually within a day or two. Nobody has ever said a word about it. The neighborhood remains peaceful, well-maintained, and genuinely pleasant to live in. Sometimes on winter mornings, when fresh snow blankets everything in white silence, I look at my car and smile. It is funny how something so ordinary became the catalyst for so much change. A car, some snow, a ridiculous fine, and one person who decided that enough was enough. That is the real lesson in all of this. Change does not always require grand gestures or elaborate plans. Sometimes it just requires one person willing to draw a line and say, "No further." One person willing to endure inconvenience and criticism to stand up for what is right. One person willing to park their car in exactly the right spot to make everyone pay attention. I am not a hero. I am not an avenger. I am just a guy who refused to pay a stupid fine and accidentally sparked a revolution. But if my story inspires even one person to stand up to their own petty tyrant, to question unjust authority, to demand accountability from those in power, then every cold minute in that car was worth it. The sun sets early in Colorado winters, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. I watch from my living room window as neighbors come home from work, kids play in the snow. Life continues in the peaceful rhythm of a functional community. This is what we fought for. This is what that cold night in January was all about. Not revenge, not attention, not even justice, really. Just the simple idea that people deserve to be treated fairly and reasonably by those who govern them. And if they are not, well, sometimes you just have to park your car in the right spot and refuse to move it.